And finally, we have our featured presentation for the month. The guest speaker is Alison Meas. The theme is Living the African Dream, and she's going to present an absolutely fantastic presentation here. I'm looking forward to this tonight, as I'm sure all of you are. About 16 years ago, Alison went to Africa, and she photographed wildlife and landscapes and people. And I think you'll see probably some of all of that this evening. She worked in Africa with the local people on community and conservation projects. She has a very strong passion for wildlife and photography, as you'll see in her photos when you look at her website, for example. She is currently planning a safari in June to the Masamara in Africa. She currently resides in the UK, and she recently gained her ARPS, an associate in the Royal Photographic Society. And I think that's to be congratulated there, Alison. So welcome, Alison, everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. So yeah, after those beautiful photos of Africa that you've already shown, maybe I should disappear. No.
No.
The presentation will be probably around 1 hour, 15 minutes, but there's time for questions at the end. If anybody has any, burning questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box, or by all means, ask them as we go along. So can everybody see the screen okay?
Yes.
Yep, great. So for me, I fell in love with Africa when I was 5 years of age, and I watched Born Free with George and Joy Adamson. And I was just amazed with the fact that they raised this lion cub. Living in the UK at the time, in Essex, I tried to persuade my parents that I wanted a lion cub as well. But funnily enough, I didn't get one. Eventually, I got a tabby kitten, which kept me quiet for a while. But what was it that was so special? Well, those wide open, endless plains that just go on forever. And I had a real fascination for cheetahs. They're the smallest of our big cats in Africa. This is a single mother raising her family all by herself. And as a photographer, it's those beautiful amber-colored eyes. So before the pandemic, I was living in Africa for 16 years. I spent 8 years in Zambia, in South Luangwa National Park, and that's where I met my husband. We got married out there and had a bush wedding. After 8 years, moving across to Malawi for a short time, and then on to Tanzania. First in the south, Selous, and then the Serengeti. And lastly, in Kenya, in Mara North Conservancy. During all of this time, our roles or jobs were safari camp managers, managing the camps where people would come and stay. But I was also involved with local community projects, primary school, health clinic. And then in the Serengeti and the Mara, I got the opportunity to work closely with the cheetah researchers there. March 2020, the pandemic hit the world. Nobody was traveling any longer, and so all the camps closed down. I then returned back to the UK, where I've been ever since. In April 2020, I became a volunteer for the Cheetah Conservation Fund in the UK, because I still wanted to do something with conservation and try to help them with fundraising and awareness. So the equipment I use is Canon. I started off with a 50D, and then after a couple of years, I changed and got a 6D, and then a 7D Mark II as well. But after a couple of years, I actually sold the 7D Mark II. I didn't particularly like it or get on with it well. So nowadays I have a 6D and a 5D Mark IV. The majority of the photos taken this evening are taken with the 6D, the first few with the 50D, and the last ones with the 5D. I mainly use for wildlife photography 100 to 400mm lens. The majority of the photos are taken either on a boat, on safari, or from a vehicle. And there'll be times when there is a lack of space. You can't move around very easily. So you can't use a tripod. The majority of the time I use a bean bag for support, or quite often I hand hold the camera and lens. So I do find the 100 to 400mm is a very versatile and flexible lens for me. I also have a 500mm fixed lens. I have a 16 to 35mm for landscapes. And then later on, you'll see that there are photos that are taken within the community. They were taken with a Tamron 28 to 300mm. So this evening, our journey through Africa is going to begin in Tanzania. It's going to start in the Selous Game Reserve. A huge reserve, 55,000 square kilometers. And it's a 45-minute flight from Dar es Salaam. Now, you've got the Rufiji River that cuts through it. North of the river is tourism. And south of it is still divided up into hunting blocks. So I was based in a camp that had 14 tents. We were working with 54 staff there, and we were based right on the river. It also gave us a lot of flexibilities for activities. Riverboat safaris, walking safaris, and game drives that you could do morning, afternoon, and at night time. So off of the river itself was 5 lakes, and every lake was very different. This was one of the lakes, thick vegetation and these palm trees. Another of the lakes had a lot of these dead trees, which made great photos for landscapes. You could very carefully weave in amongst the trees if you were careful with the boat. But it was a great location for bird photography. And wherever you go in Africa, the bird life is very vibrant. This is now going very slowly down by boat, down the main river, where you'll come across the malachite kingfisher. And then normally by the middle of the year, come July, August time, the water levels have dropped considerably in the river. Huge sandbanks appear, and so hundreds of African skimmers arrive. They actually lay their eggs right on the sandbanks there. And pied kingfishers. I don't think I've ever seen so many as I have in certain areas of Africa as you're going down by river. Just perched, waiting for that opportunity to dive in and grab a fish. And white-fronted bee-eaters. Again by July, as the water levels have dropped so much, thousands and thousands of white-fronted bee-eaters arrive because they actually build their nests in the riverbank. And late afternoon is the perfect time to go down by boat to see them. Even switching off the engine and just gliding along. That late afternoon sun hits that side of the riverbank, and the birds will just sit on the branches or old roots of the trees, and they just want to sit there and enjoy the warmth from the sun. And this is a little bee-eater. This is one of my favorite birds. Taken from a vehicle, parked up, switch off the engine, and the little bee-eater literally will take flight, and it will keep coming back to the same perch time and time again. And the one thing that you're hoping for is that it will come back with something like a butterfly or a bee. Driving around the streams and the ponds, you'll come across hammerkops. And they like to go fishing there, looking for frogs, snails. This one had just caught a small fish. Now, I normally shoot in aperture priority. The only time I'll change to shutter priority is normally birds in flight, or maybe animals running fast, like a lion or a cheetah on a hunt, for example. This bird really does fly pretty fast across those ponds. It was on a shutter speed of about 2,000th of a second for this photograph. Also, carmine bee-eaters will come in. They also like to build their nests in the riverbanks as well. Now, light really is an important factor when you're out on safari for photography. This was early in the morning. Normally the sun will rise in East Africa around 6 to 6:30, pretty much all year round. Down in Southern Africa, it will vary considerably. But this little bird is a mouse bird. And it's about 6:45 in the morning, and it's literally just sitting there with its wings open, and it's facing into the sun. And it's getting the warmth from the sun, warming up its belly. And this time of morning really is perfect for capturing birds and also mammals, because so many of them will literally be sitting there getting the warmth from the sun. They're not going to rush away or fly off too quickly. And as those water levels start to drop in the river, it can become a little bit challenging for your boat safaris. The boats like to use those deeper channels, and so do the hippos. So there will be times when one of you is going to get a little bit of a surprise. Going down again by the river and now turning into one of the lakes. Early morning, this was about, again, 7 o'clock in the morning. Crocodiles are enjoying that lovely warmth from the sun on the banks. But the one thing in Salou that really saddened me, actually, was the fact that by vehicle, if you were trying to approach elephants there, they would be running away like these. Now, I was based there in 2013. I was there for 13 months. And the elephants were very skittish, really for a couple of reasons. One, because during that time, there was a lot of poaching that was going on in the area. And thankfully, with the work that's being done by the rangers there, this has reduced dramatically. But also elephants like to cross the river and go into those hunting block areas. And of course, they would be spooked by the sound of gunshot, and they'd be running across into the other areas. But I also got the opportunity to meet the lion researchers from Frankfurt Zoological Society there. Their job was to actually photograph and record every single lion in every pride in Salou. And they taught me so much about the work that they were doing. How do you identify lions? Well, by looking at that whisker spot patterning on the face. Every single one is unique, just like our fingerprints. And then they would also be looking at things like the notches in the ears, any scars that was on the face and the body. And they were building up a picture of every single lion. For me, it certainly made me look at my photography in a different way. Previously, it was a nice portrait of a lion, or maybe lions in the landscape or trying to hunt. But now I started to look at it in a little bit more detail. I started to recognize the same lions time and time again. And so it started to build up a bit of a story for me as well. And from then on, I started, whenever I took photos of lions, would keep data for the researchers, mainly dates, times, locations, and what those lions were doing. And I would share all that information with them. Salou did have leopards, but they were very shy there. This particular female loved to live in a huge big baobab tree. So when you were driving past, you'd be checking every time, hoping that you'll get to see her. This particular morning, it was about 9 o'clock in the morning, we were driving along the track when suddenly she came out through these huge big branches and just stood there looking at us. And she was only there for about 5 or 10 minutes, which gave me the opportunity to take a couple of photos of her, and then she disappeared again. But the one amazing thing in the Salou is wild dog. They have a huge amount of wild dogs there, especially August to December. On one particular day, I saw 4 different packs of wild dogs. And I have never seen this many wild dogs anywhere else in Africa. And I do think that they do particularly well there because of the lack of other lions and hyenas. So they find it easy to raise their pups. These particular wild dog, I actually came across them. It was about 12:30 lunchtime. And to start with, they were sitting in the shade. Then suddenly 1 or 2 of them got up and went to this huge water area. They started to drink. Then they were walking through the water and even starting to play. And of course, there's also plenty of impala, which is one of their preferred prey. So after spending 13 months in Salou, which was a very hot and humid place to be working, we got the opportunity to move to the Serengeti. And for me, that was my dream as a 5-year-old. The Serengeti is much smaller than Salou. It's only 14,750 square kilometers, but the altitude is 1,500 meters. It's actually perfect temperature all year round. The Serenera is in the central part of the Serengeti, which is like the central area. And we were based just a 45-minute drive south from there. A lot of the camps are tented camps like this one. And this is where we were based. We had 12 tents. We were looking right out across the open plains with a huge big rock formation behind it. No fence. Animals can come through at any time. The whole camp run from solar power. This is the main area. So we have a lounge bar, an area where you could charge your camera batteries, phones, where there was Wi-Fi. This is the main dining tent here. And it was early in the morning at about 6:15, 6:30, and I was sitting in the office when our maintenance man came to me and said, "There's a snake on those solar panels, the ones I just showed you." So I grabbed my camera because I always kept it in the office just in case. And I walked down to the solar panels with him. I came across this snake just lying there. The sun had only just come up and it was starting to slowly warm up those solar panels. So I took a few photos using my 100 to 400 mil lens at 400 mils. The snake didn't really move much at all. It was just enjoying that warmth. But the one thing that really caught my eye was that vibrant green eye of the snake. I walked back to the office just to have a look at the photos, and I wanted to just check what type of snake it was. And looking closely, I realized it was juvenile boomslang, which is rather a poisonous snake. I walked back down to the solar panels and the snake had already gone. And I actually never saw this snake again on the solar panels or around the camp. And it certainly made me realize that, you do need to take the opportunity when it comes. Sometimes it can just be a record shot. But, if you don't take it when you see it, then you may never see it again. So in those rocky areas of the camp, you certainly got a lot of wildlife as well. And you could walk around the camp with your camera, handheld or with a tripod, just walking along the footpaths. And you'd quite often come across these. These are hyrax, or in southern Africa, they're known as dassie, and they live in amongst the rocks. April, May, they'll start to give birth to all these tiny babies. And again, they love to sit on the rocks, especially early morning and late afternoon. They were getting the warmth from the sun, so they didn't really move around very much. They let you get fairly close to them. And also on the rocks, the Angama lizard. This is the male, very vibrant in color. Again, he's sitting there getting that warmth, but also hoping for the opportunity for maybe a butterfly to fly past so he can grab it. We also had a fair share of big game as well. Huge herds of buffalo at times. Could be anything from 20 up to about 400 or 500 in numbers. Especially early morning and late evening, they would come fairly close to the camp. And for me, the buffalo is one of the most dangerous animals in Africa. It really is unpredictable. You just don't know what it's thinking. There'll be times when it will stand there and stare like this one. Other times it will run away. And there would be the occasion when it could literally come straight towards you. So for guests, early mornings and at evening time, they would always be escorted by one of our Maasai security. and also plenty of lions coming through the camp as well. This female had actually come down to an area that was right in the camp, which had a little sort of marshy area. And she just came down to drink. I actually took the vehicle and I drove down, and I took this out the side window of the vehicle because my aim was trying to get the shot looking directly at her. For me, in the camp, early mornings and nighttime, I'd be walking around by myself with just a bright torch and a radio. And on this one particular evening, I was walking from the main area of the camp along the footpaths past the guest tents, shining my torch as I walked, when suddenly, in the torchlight, I picked up a lion heading straight towards me. I stopped. I shone my torch around because I wanted to check if there were any other lions around. Slowly, slowly, I walked backwards to a huge big rock formation. I called on the radio to our security and said, well, there's lions in camp, so make sure you don't come this area with guests. I slowly walked back to the main area where my husband was quite surprised to see me back so soon, until I showed him the lion. And then he understood my reasoning. The lion actually went down to one of the guest tents and just laid down there in front of it and fell asleep. At the time, we had guests in the camp, but they were all having dinner in the main dining tent. So I just walked down there and said to them, well, don't rush your meal and maybe have another glass of wine or two, because at the moment your tent is occupied. And after about 30-35 minutes, the lion actually woke up, had a huge big stretch and yawn, and then just walked out through the camp and out the other side. And I think he was literally having a bit of a cat nap before going out hunting for the night. Also right next to the camp, we had a spotted hyena den. There was about 20 individuals that were living there. So of course, early mornings when your game drives left the camp, you would always stop there to see what was going on. At times, you would see the hyenas returning to the den with breakfast. This one was coming back with the leg of a zebra. And of course, the small ones were too young to go out hunting or scavenging. So they would always be there with their mother or a babysitter. But as a camp manager, you know, it was a bit of a nightmare actually having hyenas right next to you, because every single night you had to make sure everything was locked away. Otherwise, the next morning, things were just scattered all over the plains. Cushions were ripped up. They were literally like naughty puppies. And then about a 20-minute game drive away, we had a lake. It was perfect for bird watching and photography there. For 5 months of the year, the flamingos would come and arrive because they would come to feed from the lake there. Late afternoon, around 5:30, you got that beautiful light. The vehicles could drive right to the edge of the lake. You could actually get out of the vehicle. You could sit on the ground or even lie low on the ground to photograph the flamingos. This was taken with my 500mm lens. You could also capture them taking off or coming into land as well, again with my 500mm lens. And both of these photos were taken at around 5:30 in the evening. And there was plenty of other bird life there. Cape teal, black-winged stilts, where they would literally just balance on one leg and stand there for hours on end. And this was the same lake in 2015. Now, this particular year, we had a very low rainfall. And so the whole lake just dried up to this small pond. Nobody had actually seen it this low in water. And we were all considerably worried about it. In 2016, huge rainfall. And so the whole area totally flooded. And it was only in 2017 that we had an average rainfall again. So for 2 years, the flamingos never arrived. And also close by in the Serengeti was a huge big rock formation called Gong Rock. You can actually climb up the side of the rock. There's tiny little steps into it. And when you get up the top, there's a beautiful view of the Serengeti. But also this smaller rock on there, which as you can see, have got these indentations. By taking a small rock or pebble, you can tap it and you get a metallic sound. And so it's believed that when the Maasai were living in the Serengeti, they used to actually come up onto this rock and use it as a form of communication between the different communities. You can also go down and visit the caves where the Maasai used to live, and you can still see their rock art there now. The Serengeti also has a good population of lions, and you'll quite often see 1 or 2 in each pride with a collar on like this one, just to make it a little bit easier for them to track. It was the first area that I'd realized that lions climb trees. This is one pride of lions up one tree, and this is an acacia tree. And lions will climb for a few reasons. One, it's nice and cool and refreshing on the belly when it's very hot in that midday sun. After the long rains, in certain areas, the grass can be very tall. So by climbing a tree, you certainly get a good viewpoint looking for prey in the distance. But also there is areas where there are a lot of tsetse flies, and they can really bite at times. So for the lions, by climbing the tree, they can get away from those biting tsetse flies. But the one amazing thing that happens in the Serengeti and the Mara is the wildebeest migration. What an amazing journey. They reckon each individual animal will cover around 1,000 miles in this journey. It's late December. We're now down in the southern part of the Serengeti. The herds have gathered and all the females are pregnant. Normally by early January, the wildebeest start to calve. Around 500,000 wildebeest calves are born every single year. And that was the one thing that I really wanted to see. So every year while I was in the Serengeti, and I was there for 3 years, I would take 10 days of holiday time, and I would go down and stay in the Ndutu area, which is next to the southern part of the Serengeti, hoping to capture the wildebeest migration, but especially wildebeest giving birth. Now, for the first 2 years, I certainly saw plenty of wildebeest and lots of calves. The third year I went down, which was about the same time of year, there was not one wildebeest there. The plains were empty. There was plenty of bird life, there was elephants, and there was lots of predators around. So for me, there was plenty to see, but there was not one wildebeest. The rains had come very late, and so the wildebeest hadn't even arrived. After about 4 days being down there, and one night when everybody was asleep, we had a huge thunderstorm, heavy rain. The next morning, I went out on safari. The plains were covered with wildebeest. It finally arrived. And so after a couple of days, I actually came across this one wildebeest. Again, it was about midday. It was really hot. There was a huge heat haze. It was quite difficult to see in the distance. But this one female started to walk in huge, big circles, slowly, slowly walking. And then suddenly, after about 1 hour, she started to lay down. And eventually she gave birth to this tiny calf. After a few minutes, it was already on its feet and very wobbly. After about 15-20 minutes, the two of them were already walking, trying to catch up with the rest of the herd. The wildebeest and zebra stay down in the southern part of the Serengeti for about 3 months. The grass is very nutritious down there, so that it gives the opportunity for the young ones to get their strength up. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, it's plenty of time for the predators. Lions, hyenas, jackals, cheetahs, leopards. They all benefit from the wildebeest migration. And cheetahs even come in from other areas of the Serengeti to give birth and also know that there will be plenty of food for them to raise their young family down there. And then by late March, it's time for the wildebeest to start moving on. Walking up through the plains. And now by June, it's already very dry and dusty. There's very little grass left and very little water. And so for the herds, they must keep moving on. Normally by July, they start to cross the Mara River. And it really is an amazing thing to watch. When you do go down to the river, there are many crossing points. And normally the guides are busy talking to each other to communicate. Sometimes you'll sit at a crossing with a herd, hoping that they're going to cross. Maybe you're there for 5-10 minutes and they start to cross. Or you could sit there and wait for 8 hours before they start to cross. It's very unpredictable. There'll be times when the crossing can last 5 minutes, or maybe it can go on for a good 2 hours. Now, when the wildebeest herds start to gather, all the vehicles must stay back because we want to give those wildebeest the opportunity to go down the riverbank and start to cross. Once they go into the river and start to cross, then very slowly the game drive vehicles can approach right to the edge of the riverbank. But of course, it's really dangerous for the wildebeest and zebra. There's strong currents, deep water at times, and at times there can be hundreds or even thousands crossing at one time. And on the other side of the riverbank, huge crocodiles just waiting for them. Some of them will not make it purely because they could be old, tired, or sick. The riverbanks are very steep in places and also very slippery. So some of them just slide back down, they drown, and of course, there's vultures and crocodiles waiting for them. The wildebeest and zebra stay in the Mara for about 3 months, enjoying that lush green grass there. By mid-October, the short rains start, and so for the wildebeest, it's time for them to start that journey all over again. Walking all the way back through the Serengeti. And by late December, they're already back down in the southern part of the Serengeti, ready for another calving year. As I say, it really is an amazing journey that they do every single year. And staying down in that area, these are Fisher's lovebirds, only found in the north and central part of Tanzania. Banded mongoose, running across the marsh areas, looking for insects, but also taking advantage of certain birds like plovers that will lay eggs on the ground. And wherever you go in the Mara, in the Serengeti, you will certainly see some beautiful, magnificent male lions with these really magnificent manes. This one in particular really caught my eye because it's very blonde, which is very unusual. And I haven't actually altered it at all in post-processing. And this was his brother, very different in coloration. And of course, you know, when the time of the migration, it's a time for fun and play with lion cubs. Lions on average can sleep 16 to 20 hours per day. So normally lions will only be active very early in the morning, very late afternoon, evening, and at night time. But of course, when they've got lion cubs in the pride, they start to become active a little bit earlier on. So it makes things a little bit more interesting. This was taken about 6:30 in the evening. And this lion pride, I'd been sitting and watching for a good couple of hours, and everybody was just sound asleep. It was only about 6 o'clock at night when the cubs started to wake up and move around a little bit. And so it was in the Serengeti that I got to meet Dennis, who was working for the cheetah project there. He was a researcher who took me out in the field, and he taught me so much about cheetahs, their behavior, and how to identify individuals. So we learned that you could identify lions by their whisker spot patterning on their face. Well, cheetahs, it's by looking at the spot patterning on the coat. Every single one is unique, just like our fingerprints. This cheetah, her name is Clementine, and I came across her very early in the morning in the Serengeti. It was about 6 o'clock and it was still fairly dark. It was August and it was actually fairly cold. I had 2 jackets on at the time. And we were driving along and we'd just seen her in the distance, just as a silhouette. And then we finally got fairly close to her. Sun was up. It's about 6:45 in the morning now. And she was sitting on this huge big rock formation. They call them koppies there. And she was sitting there getting the warmth from the sun, but also looking out across the open plains as well. And in the Serengeti and the Mara, you'll quite often see these big rock formations, which are perfect for looking for lions, leopards, hyenas, and cheetahs, especially early mornings and late afternoons, evening time. Another cheetah from the Mara, her name's Tia Maria, and she was raising these, originally she had 4 cubs. I then came across her again when she had 1 cub of 15 months of age. And a cheetah mum has to teach her cubs how to hunt and survive by themselves. And what she was doing was the fact that she'd just taken down a young wildebeest, which is in front of her. She'd suffocated it, but not killed it. She then called her cub over and she walked away. She was training her cub how to kill. Now, the cub was inexperienced. It didn't really know what to do. So to start with, it went for the stomach area. And then eventually it worked out that, yes, you have to go to the throat or neck to suffocate it. Once the wildebeest calf was dead, then the mother came and joined the cub and they ate together. And we sat there observing all of this over about a good 1.5 to 2 hours. The light was a little bit harsh at times, but it was interesting to actually see the behavior and the interaction that went on with the mother and the cub. And it's one thing that I always say to people when you're out on safari, whether it's in Africa or another place around the world, is don't just go out there with a long list of animals and birds that you want to see and just tick them off. Actually spend time slowly sitting and watching and observing. You certainly get to learn a lot, you'll see a lot, and you will come across and you will come back with some great photos and memories as well. Maasai giraffe, for me, very elegant. And these giraffes were all standing very still, all huddled together, all looking in one direction. And it normally really means that when they're doing this and they're all looking in one direction, that there is a threat or danger for them. And I was trying to see exactly what they were looking at, but I didn't have that height advantage that they have. And it was only after about 20 minutes when suddenly this lion popped his head up. And that's what they'd been looking at all that time. Honey badgers are nocturnal, so it's very unusual to see them during the daytime. This one I came across as we were driving along at about 5 o'clock in the evening, excuse me, when suddenly out of a termite mound, this honey badger appeared. And he literally climbed down the termite mound and was sniffing around in the grass area. He was quite curious. He actually came quite near to the vehicle, even gave me the opportunity to pick up my camera and take a few photographs. In fact, the honey badger literally was just standing there staring at us at one stage, and then carried on sniffing around and then went back down the termite mound again. And this is actually the only honey badger I have seen in daytime. And wherever you're going in Africa, you'll certainly come across elephants. Early mornings, they're coming out from the forest areas and they slowly start to walk across the open plains. By mid-morning, they're starting to have a bit of a play fight with each other. By midday, enjoying that cool, refreshing dust bath. And if the elephants are coming towards you and start to approach your vehicle, it's great just to switch off the engine and just sit there and let them walk all around you. You know, they're very curious. They'll raise their trunks and they'll start to sniff you around. But you can also appreciate their size and how quietly they move. And whilst they're coming fairly close to you, you can certainly get up close with your camera as well. Zoom in on the texture of the skin or even the eye. Because for me, looking at their eye, I really think you're looking into their soul. And a question I often get asked is, will I see a leopard on safari? Well, in Selous, they are quite shy and you don't often see one. But in the Serengeti and the Mara, yes, you do have a good opportunity to see a leopard. Sometimes it could be just a glimpse of one coming down from a tree, or maybe just a tail dangling. Or maybe like this one that was just sitting out, looking out across the open plains. Or this one who spent the whole afternoon sound asleep on that branch, enjoying that late afternoon sun. And I sat there for quite a few hours, it was probably about 4 hours, at different angles, hoping that it was going to wake up, which it did. And then I was hoping it was going to jump down and start to hunt. But unfortunately, it just went back to sleep. Certain times of the year, the acacia trees come into flower, so it attracts the baboons. Even the little ones enjoying the flowers. The bird life we mentioned earlier, well, it really is colourful and very varied there. These are yellow-billed oxpeckers enjoying a ride on the back of a buffalo and then taking flight from buffalo to buffalo or zebra or giraffe. This was actually taken at 2000th of a second, hoping to just get that head in focus. And the lilac-breasted roller, which I think had been mentioned earlier. Yes, you know, it is probably one of the most photographed birds in the whole of Africa. And, you know, when the sunlight hits those feathers, it really is a rainbow of color. And these are pygmy falcons. Now, I've only ever seen them in the southern part of the Serengeti when the migration has been here. And they are tiny little birds. This is actually a juvenile and an adult. It was taken with my 6D, 100 to 400 mil lens. It was at quite a distance, so it's actually been highly cropped, this photograph. And a Marshall eagle that had recently taken a small guinea fowl and taken it up into a tree. And of course, after the rainy season, you certainly get lots of babies. Hartebeest, zebra, plenty of lion cubs after the rains, but any time of the year. And warthogs, probably one of the hardest things to photograph, whether they're babies or adults, because whenever you pick up your camera, they turn their back on you, put their tail up in the air and just run away. And of course, huge herds of elephants that gather, enjoying that lush grass then. And so after 3.5 years in the Serengeti, I got the opportunity to move with the same company to the Masai Mara. And the Mara ecosystem is even smaller than the Serengeti. It's only 3,000 square kilometers. It borders the national park, but you have the National Reserve here, and then you have all these different conservancies which border the reserve. And all of this together makes up the Mara ecosystem. There's no fences between the conservancies and the reserve. They can move, the animals can move freely between. I was based in Mara North Conservancy, which is 300 square kilometers. Now, a conservancy is land that is owned by the local community, the Maasai. So as a camp, we would pay a monthly rent to be there as a camp. So for the Maasai, they benefited from this money. And in Mara North, we had over 700 landowners, which meant that more than 700 families were actually benefiting from tourism in this area. And for me, this really is the way to go and a win-win, because it is the wildlife, the community and tourism all being together, but also benefiting together. Conservancies do have an advantage over national parks. National parks have quite strict rules and regulations. Your game drives are from sunrise to sunset, and you have to stay on the road. You cannot do any off-road driving. So if you see a line in the very far distance, you cannot drive over to it. A conservancy has less vehicles, so it's much more flexible. You can do morning drives, afternoon drives, night drives there, and also walk-in safaris. You can go off-road. So if you see that line in the very far distance, you can drive across and up to it, but still keeping a 20-meter distance. Only 5 vehicles at a sighting at any one time in a conservancy. In a national park, you might actually have 30 or 40 vehicles around one cheetah or lion. To Mara North is a direct flight of around 40 minutes from Nairobi. Wherever you are on safari, your guides will be there to meet you, welcome you, give you a briefing, and then that's when your safari begins. Safari camping is comfortable. This was the camp in the Mara where we were. Oops. All the tents are en suite. You've got Wi-Fi charging in the tents. But safari time starts early in the morning. That's the best time to get out there. Your wake-up call will normally be around 5 o'clock, maybe a little bit earlier. You'll have tea, coffee around the campfire or in your tent. And you need to leave the camp while it's still dark, because those lions, those other predators are still active early in the morning and late at night. On this particular morning, I'd headed out because I'd heard some lions calling in the distance. It was still dark when I left the camp, and I wanted to try to find the lions before the sunrise. But unfortunately, I just didn't catch up with them. I don't know where they disappeared to. But just as the light was coming up and the sun was rising, I came across these 2 wildebeest. So I parked the vehicle slightly low so I could try to capture those wildebeest as a silhouette as the sun was rising. And of course, as the sun is coming up, you know, trying to get that nice early morning light. So again, sun was coming across on the side of this lioness, and we positioned the vehicle just in front of her, and she was literally walking straight towards us. Early mornings, you might also see the hot air balloons coming across. And, you know, safaris is also about being flexible out there. There's no point rushing back for breakfast. Take your breakfast with you and have it whenever you want. You can have it at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, even 11 o'clock in the morning if you wish. You normally come back to camp for lunch. It's a time for you to have a bit of a rest, charge those camera batteries. And then normally by around 4 p.m., the light is not quite so harsh again, so you start to venture out. By around 6:15, 6:30, you park up, you can get out of the vehicle and enjoy a sundowner, glass of wine, cold beer, and watch the sunset. You know, every single sunset is very different as well. And again, while you're out there in the vehicle, or out of the vehicle, you can set up your tripod or lie low and capture. This one was the wildebeest. And on this occasion, there was 2 Maasai warriors literally walking across the plains. And I just asked them if they minded just standing against the sunlight. I was lying low, so I could shoot up and get their silhouette. And then after the sunset, you know, you can carry on with a night drive or maybe return back to camp and enjoy a refreshing drink around the campfire, sharing your stories and events of the day. And as it gets dark and it's a clear night, you get to see the Milky Way or the Southern Cross. And whichever camp you stay at when you're on safari, you certainly get to see a lot of animals coming through the camp or very near to it. This particular cheetah loved to sit in this area, always looking into our camp. And I always wondered what she was thinking about. Was she wondering what the chefs were cooking for dinner tonight? We also had a resident pride of lions around. These particular 2 females had 2 older cubs and 7 small cubs. And the night before, the females had decided to go hunting. Those 7 tiny cubs were too small to go out hunting. So they actually left them in these bushes here overnight. The next morning, the females came back with the older cubs to collect the young ones. And it certainly makes you think, and making sure that, yes, you do need an escort early mornings and at night time, and a bright torch to check where you're walking. When we arrived in the Mara, these were the 2 dominant males of this area, the 2 brothers. They had 4 females and there were 16 cubs of various ages. For 2 years, there was plenty of water and food for them. Another of the females, Amber. The cubs could relax, they could play, they were inquisitive. The males really looked after the territory and the pride well. Another of the females, who I came across, who had recently given birth to 3 cubs. This was 6:30 in the evening, and she was actually just moving the cubs from one den site to the other. It's taken with an ISO of 8000. It was with my 100 to 400mm lens, which was struggling slightly with the light and with my 6D. I only did a slight bit of noise reduction in Lightroom with this. After 2 years, a coalition of 4 males moved into the area and wanted to take over the pride. One night there was a huge fight, and one of the male lions, Karibu, one of the 2 brothers, was badly injured. Unfortunately, he had to be put down by the vet, and these 4 males took over the pride. They came in and they actually killed every single lion cub, the small cubs and the older cubs as well. And then they started to mate with the females. And they still are the dominant 4 males that look after this pride even now. But the one thing that surprised me in the Mara was the behavior of buffaloes there. Very different to anywhere else I'd seen in Africa. They literally would smell, and wherever lions had been, they would literally go and they would trash the area, they would stampede it. They would also chase lions up into trees and not let them back down again. And the buffaloes were responsible for many lion cub deaths in the Mara. I'm now going to introduce you to 2 cheetah brothers, Billy and Maeli. When I first arrived in this conservancy, 3 cheetahs arrived, the 2 brothers with their sister. They were very shy to start with. Their sister stayed with them for about 3 months and then left to ensure no interbreeding happened. I got to watch these 2 cheetah brothers over 2.5 years. They grew into very strong, magnificent brothers. This particular morning, I came across them and they'd been trying to hunt gazelle, but the grass was so short, they just could not get close enough to them. By lunchtime, they had then come across some wildebeest. They saw a young one. They took it down and was trying to suffocate it, when out of the bushes came this lioness and stole it from them. And off ran the cheetahs in the distance. It's now hot midday, so they decided to have a little bit of a rest for a few hours. By around 4 p.m., 4:30, they were back out again and they were trying to hunt. But as this grass was so short, it was making life very difficult for them. Eventually, they came across some impala in the distance. They tried again. Full speed ahead, they succeeded. One suffocating it, one holding it down. The cheetah brothers were eating quickly. After 1 hour, their bellies are full, and already vultures and hyenas had already arrived. So for the cheetah brothers, they just walked away. Also in the Mara, especially December, January, February, we get these really misty mornings. It makes it really difficult for cheetahs or any predator to go hunting. But I must say, it really gives great atmosphere to your photography. And this is another cheetah, Amani. She's actually 10 years of age and probably one of the oldest cheetahs in the Mara now. In 2018, she gave birth to 3 cubs. She kept the cubs very well hidden for 4 weeks, and then she started to bring them out into the open. On this particular afternoon, she was walking across the grasslands with them when suddenly in the distance, a hyena saw her and was heading straight towards her. Now she was trying to chase the hyena away, but the hyena was determined to get the cubs. Cheetahs are endangered. There's less than 7,500 left in the wild. And so normally we don't intervene with nature, but this time the rangers had a vehicle there and they drove their vehicle between her and the cubs and the hyena. The hyena couldn't see the cubs any longer. So after about 15 minutes, it got bored and walked away. And so for Amani and her cubs, it was a very lucky day. The cubs are growing. They're 6 months of age now. They're too young to go hunting for themselves, but they'll practice those skills of stalking and pouncing on each other. They'll watch their mother, and that's how they learn how to hunt. And of course, they will enjoy anything that she has caught for them. At 10 months, they're nearly as big as their mother in the middle. And their brother had just caught a hare. And of course, he didn't share it with his sisters. At 18 months, they've become independent, meaning that their mother is already pregnant and just walks away and leaves the cubs by themselves. They stayed together for another 3 months, and after this time, they all split. And as of now, they're still leading solitary lives. The 2 females are named Queely and Quiletta, and both of them already have their own litters of cubs. And their brother, Jasiri, he's leading a solitary life by himself. In our neighbouring conservancy, we had a breeding project of 2 white rhinos, and you could actually go and visit there. You can get out of the vehicle and you can walk around with an armed ranger. So you can learn a lot about the white rhino. You can also get fairly close and you can try different angles as well. And as we were in a conservancy, you'll certainly come across the Maasai out with their goats and sheep. But you can also go and visit the Manyatta where they live. The Maasai are very proud. They have lovely, vibrant colours. This was actually taken with my wide angle. It was at 24 mils. And I was trying to just try at a low angle looking up, just to look at a different perspective. And of course, they always wanted to tell you about their traditions, how they used to hunt with bow and arrow, or how you can make a fire without a box of matches by rubbing 2 sticks of wood together, dried grass and elephant dung. And this was the chief of the local village, 6 wives and 35 children, and he couldn't remember most of their names. But the women built the houses. It takes 4 weeks to build a house with a wooden structure and then a combination of cow dung and mud smeared inside and out. And this is the finished houses, very small, as you can see, just a door, and some of the houses have very small windows. There's no running water, so every day the women have to walk and collect water from the river. And if they were very lucky, like these ladies, they would have donkeys to help them. Otherwise, they carry the containers by themselves. There's always a fire lit at their houses because they do have small windows, but it's also to cook with, to keep the house warm and to keep mosquitoes away. No electricity. Slowly you see these small solar panels, mainly used for charging mobile phones. And the women sit at the village and do beadwork. They love to have their photos taken. The Maasai really encourage it, so you never have to feel offended by taking photos of them. You know, providing you could show them the back of your camera, they really do enjoy it. Once a week is market day. Now, the Maasai don't have bank accounts like we do, so if they need to buy something or pay a bill, they need to sell a cow or go to a sheep at the market first. But also there is a second-hand market for clothes. This gentleman was selling old shoes made from old tires. This is where the ladies will sell their beadwork. And you can also buy vegetables, beans, rice, etc. there. There are quite a few primary schools around. Primary school is free education. This was a school that I was working with. There was 50-50 boys to girls and about 450 children at the school. But the classrooms were very crowded, on average about 60 children to a classroom, around 4 to 5 children to a desk. But the children loved education. They really wanted to learn. And so I was doing some fundraising to help repair old desks, build new desks, repair old classrooms for them. And of course, whenever they had the chance, they would play football. And these are one of their homemade footballs, made from plastic bags and string. Now just moving back to the wildlife of the Mara. So the build-up of the rainy season, you get these very dramatic skies and isolated showers. And this was around 6:30 in the evening when I came across this one wildebeest that was just walking in the distance. This is actually taken with my 100 to 400 mm lens, just to isolate that wildebeest with those showers. Quite often you'll come across a cheetah, and you know, what a bonus with her cubs as well. This was one of 4 jackal puppies. Originally, they were walking with their mother and father across the plains when suddenly they came across this termite mound. It must have been new to them, new smells. They were running all over it. And then suddenly they decided to jump in and out of the holes. And so I was quite lucky in a way to actually capture it just jumping out at the time. I'd been sitting watching them for a good 2 hours. I did have a fast shutter speed. This was, I think, 1/1600th of a second. And giraffe just walking across the plains. And this one I just decided I like black and white, especially with landscapes. I just wanted to try it with the giraffe. Maybe capturing them enjoying a drink. Or serval cat, which are very shy. They like to be in the tall grass because they're tending to hunt there looking for birds and rodents. So it is difficult to see them at times. And two brothers enjoying a nice, refreshing drink. And reflections. This was a impala. It just come down to a puddle and started to drink. And when it gets hot, you're enjoying either a dust bath, as we looked at earlier, or this one was actually enjoying a real mud bath. And again, a fast shutter speed, because I wanted to try to capture the mud actually flying across the elephant. And these were two bulls that were coming out from the forest area, starting to walk across the grass area. Zebra's having a little bit of an argument. And the beauty of the leopard. This was a young male lion. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning. He was having a bit of a stretch, but he was also calling for his brother at the same time. And for me, this quote really does sum up Africa. Oops, sorry. And I think, you know, any of you that have been to Africa, you will probably agree with me as well. And as I mentioned, or someone mentioned earlier, you know, for me, I am, after 2.5 years, going to go back to Africa for the first time in June to do a safari that I'm leading. I also am going back in November for 2 safaris, and then again in February as well for a few safaris. So if anybody is interested and wants to come and join me on one of my safaris in the Mara, please feel free to contact me through my website or my email, and I'd be very happy to give you more information about it. And I am using the conservancies that I spoke about as well. So thank you for joining me in a little bit of my journey through Africa this evening. And I'll be very happy to answer any questions anybody has, or if you do think of any later on, feel free to drop me an email. I'm always happy to chat about Africa or any questions that you might have. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your presentation was as good
Very
as I
good.
thought it would be.
Excellent.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Loved it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this was
I love-
wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I enjoyed every second of it. Beautiful.
Me too.
I want to go back.
Allison,
Yeah.
I like that you showed the camps. And is that where you're staying for your trips?
I'm not, no,
More or
the first
less?
one was in the Serengeti, actually, where I was based.
Mhm.
Second one was where I was based in the Mara. So it's not identical, but they're very similar in design and setup where I'm staying.
Now, when we went to South Africa,
Yeah.
we were in, not tents, we were in, I don't know, what would you call them? You know, cabins?
Yeah, like a rondeval or something. Yeah.
It was very luxury,
Yes.
but I would actually like a tent, I believe.
Mhm.
A comfortable one with a bed, not sleeping bags.
Yeah. And yeah,
I'm a little too old for that one.
and that, you know, and they've all got ensuite toilet and shower these days as well.
Right.
Many years ago, you used to have to go out, you know, in the middle of, if you needed the bathroom in the middle of the night, you'd have to go out to a separate toilet somewhere, shining your torch, checking that you didn't bump into a hippo or anything en route.
Now, so I kind of liked having hard walls though. So I'm just wondering, like, how is it safe that the animals don't get into your tent?
Well, you know, the animals, you know, they see it as a big unit. So they see it as one thing. So they'll literally walk around it. So, you know, when you're in your tent at night, yes, you will hear, you know, elephants maybe breaking branches nearby and things,
Wow.
or
Good.
hippos munching. The only thing that really tries to get in your tent will be the monkeys and the baboons, especially if you leave food in there.
Hmm.
And if they get in your tent, they won't just leave food in there at times. It can be very unpleasant.
Okay.
So yes, but otherwise, it is, even when you're in the vehicle as well, they see it as one unit. So again, it's very safe.
I like the Land Rover.
Right.
Yeah.
I see the Land Rover as a unit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We will keep in touch because I would love to try to do this again.
Yeah, no problem. Please feel free to.
And I know how to reach you.
Yes, definitely. Perfect.
Very good. Again, Alison, thank you so much for this presentation. I think it was absolutely wonderful, and I enjoyed it so much, and I learned a lot. Really beautiful.
Brilliant.
Thank you. The explanations and the narrative was perfect, and the photos out of this world. Thank you.
Yep, for sure.
Brilliant.
It was
thank
wonderful.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
You're very
you.
welcome.
Yes, thank you.
The migration is when in the Mara? Or
Migration-
calving?
Well, the main wildebeest migration calving is in southern Serengeti, and it will normally be February and March. And then the migration comes through July, August time. But I'm actually going to the Mara in February because it is actually the loiter migration, which is slightly smaller than the main migration. But you've still got over 100,000 wildebeest, which
Oh,
is
that's
a lot
not
of
too bad.
wildebeest.
Not too shoddy.
Yeah, it's not just a handful.
I
and
might be able to shoot one or two.
yeah, and they carve in February in the Mara, which is brilliant.
Okay.
Which is a great
That
time.
sounds like the time.
Yeah.
All right.
That sounds
Wow.
like the time.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
I'll just
I'm
mention
so
that,
glad.
excuse me. I'll just mention that we do have the information on Allison's safaris located in the documents section of our website. And we'll post the link to that also in the activities section where we show all our previous.
Yes.
And so you have access to these things if you want to follow up with Allison in the future.
Great.
Terrific. How many people on a safari do you take?
In one vehicle, 4 people. So you've got space to move around. I like to have small groups, it's very personal so that I can spend time with everybody as well. And we do a lot of pre-departure chats as well, so we can go through equipment or anything people particularly want to photograph and things, or any concerns and that as well.
Is that the number of guests then at the camp at one time?
Yeah, in a vehicle 4, if it's 2 groups of photographers, you can run 2 vehicles, no problem, but there would only be 4 people in a vehicle.
Well, my question though is how many guests are there at the camp at one time?
Oh, so at the camp. At the camp itself, it's got 6 tents, so 12 people in
Thank you.
one of them, and the other one is just slightly bigger, which has got 12 guests. Yeah.
So you've got enough vehicles then to accommodate all
yeah.
those guests.
But those vehicles are allocated purely to me. So yeah.
Very nice. Good.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
you're not sharing with other guests or anything.
Okay, wonderful.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Anybody else have questions or comments?
Want to go as a club? All of
Yeah,
us?
Anybody?
Yeah, I'm in. You know
Feel
that.
free. We can put the whole camp out then, which would be
There
fun
you go.
actually.
That would be fun.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
Is February coming quickly?
Everything's coming quickly.
Yeah, really.
That's the scary thing, that
least-
everything does go fast.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's getting faster and faster.
Yep.
I'll remind
Yeah.
everybody that Alison's coming to us from Essex, England. So it's 5 hours later there. It's quite early in the morning now for her.
Oh, Allison, go to
Night,
bed.
You email her allowances for replies. They may not come immediately from her.
Thank
No
you.
problem.
Thank you for staying up with us.
Yes,
No
thank you very
problem.
much.
No worries at all. It was great to meet you all, so thank you.
Thank you, Allison.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
And
Thank you,
keep
Alison.
well, everyone, and keep safe and get out there and
You too.
enjoy your photography.
You also.
Yeah, you
Great.
too.
Your pictures are stunning. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Uh,
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Thank you.
Have a
you.
good night.
And we'll
All
say
right.
goodnight to
And
everybody.
All
you.
right.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
Bye
everybody.
now.
Bye.
Everybody,
Night.
Night.
enjoy.
Good night, everyone.
See
Night.
you all soon.
Bye.
Have a good evening.
Bye-bye, everyone.